After a long drawn-out back and forth between the National Electricity Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, and Eskom, as well as public consultation, the decision has been made to increase the price of electricity in Africa's most developed economy. Eskom, the country's struggling state power utility, asked for a 20.50% increase for the 2022-2023 financial year. However, NERSA only agreed for prices to rise by 9.61%, less than half of what was asked for. NERSA rarely allows Eskom the full amount it applies for, with disputes between the two often ending in the courts, just like this one. Eskom has argued that NERSA has not allowed it to recoup sufficient revenue via electricity tariffs over many years, citing that as a reason it has been dependent on government bailouts. In a presentation last month, the National Energy Regulator's chairperson said the 9.61% constitutes a 3.49% increase for the 2022-23 year, alongside legacy costs from previous years. He also said that this increased decision is meant to balance the interests of the economy, consumers, and the utility. The price hikes will take the average electricity tariff in South Africa from just over 1.33 rand per kilowatt hour to around 1.46 rand. The increase will take effect from the 1st of April 2022 for Eskom customers, and this is separate from the increase that municipal customers can expect to pay, and that increase takes effect from the 1st of July 2022. Today, we're looking at the hike approved by the regulator and its impact on South Africa. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulope-Adeleru Balogun. And joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa is Ted Blom. He's a mining and energy advisor. Ted, good to see you again. Thank you for being here on Business Edge.
Good day to you.
All right. So we know that Eskom has been a major drain on South Africa's finances for many years, and the company is claiming that the 20.5% increase that it asked for was to enable it to recoup sufficient revenue and was also driven by purchases from independent power producers and carbon taxes, two things that are outside of the company's direct control. And those two costs alone make up around 13.8% of the requested increase. So without particularly focusing on how much Eskom has asked for, does Eskom have a case for asking for an increase at this point in time, based on the reasons given?
Okay, so we've got a major problem with Eskom, and you will be aware of the fact that there have been various commissions of inquiry into Eskom, and that according to the minister in charge of Eskom, Eskom was at the center of what was called state capture, or just massive corruption, if you will. If I can give you a quick background in one sentence, the tariff increases since 2007, when Eskom started becoming very, very corrupt, have averaged over 700% for certain categories of people. And bear in mind, there are 900 different tariff arrangements in South Africa. It's clearly against the inflation index over the same period of 70%, 79%. It's clear that Eskom has gorged the pocket from its consumers, and its consumers cannot afford these tariff increases. In fact, I'm at a loss. I've now been doing a lot of introspection about these tariff increases over the last 15 years. And I'm at a loss to explain how Eskom has not been able to trim its budget to the ability or the needs of the country. I mean, every year for the last 15 years, barring 1 year, they've had increases way above the rate of inflation. And surely Eskom's costs are very much tied to the South African economy, and they should be able to survive on an inflation increase. And that has been the case for the previous 90-odd years of Eskom's existence. So why now, under the state capture, Eskom needs to have these exorbitant tariff increases is way beyond me. And in fact, I've just given up on the matter. As far as I can see, we've now got acknowledgement from the government in papers that the government was forced to make public, that the government or the ruling party has designated people, members of the party, to various important institutions. So the head of the regulator is a deployed person by the party. The head of Eskom is a deployed person by the party. And it seems to me irrational to expect the party members to fight amongst each other for the benefit of the public. So the public sucks the hind teeth, so to speak. And that's where we are at the moment. And this is in need of drastic intervention, one way or the other, because this has broken our South African economy. We have closed down 45 smelters in the last 15 years and over 70 foundries. And we've got an unemployment rate unofficially of over 50%. I mean that the government and the ruling party can't seem to understand that this is a disaster is way beyond anybody's comprehension.
Okay, and I like you bring up unemployment. We'll touch on some of the numbers surrounding the South African economy and what this increase means. But let's look at something that the NERSA chairperson said. And he mentioned that the increase is meant to balance the interest of the economy and consumers. So the regulator approved 9.61% rather than 20.50% as it's requested. What did NERSA consider, if you can put together what you think they may have considered, in arriving at the 9.61%? Does it give Eskom any kind of leeway? And do you think it really does balance the interest of the consumer and the company?
I think with this latest introspection that I've forced myself to go through, it's very, very clear that NERSA has failed in its charge to balance the needs of the consumers and Eskom. It's in fact only looked after Eskom because, as I said, every year for the last 15 years, bar 1 year when there was a new regulator in place who's now been removed by the ruling party, Eskom got increases way above the rate of inflation. And I mean, at one stage they were arguing that they needed that to fund their capital expansion. Well, you don't fund the capital expansion out of a single year's budget. Similarly, you don't pay your house off in 1 year. You take a bond and you pay it off over 20 or 40 years or whatever. But and so it's preposterous for Eskom to expect the South African public and all the consumers in the SABC, in fact, to help it to fund its exorbitant capex, which also is as a runaway. It's more than 10 times more expensive than the World Bank average. So we've got endemic corruption, and not only have we now had commissions of inquiry that confirm that, but it's continuing and it's actually accelerating. And as I stand now, there are charges that I've laid together with the unions against the management of Eskom for gross corruption. And because it's all party politically affiliated, and nothing gets done about it. So it seems to me the ruling party is quite happy to see the South African economy collapse, because that's exactly where we're heading.
So you mentioned the SADC area now. So there are some who say that the fact that Eskom may have been forced, in a way, controlled to keep electricity tariffs low for a while, because it said that the average is relatively low compared to the global average, as well as some of the legacy debts. There are municipalities and cities in South Africa that owe Eskom. There are even neighbors of South Africa that owe Eskom. How much does this contribute to the company's issues?
Okay, so I mean, I hear the argument about Eskom being globally still competitive, but that's a nonsense argument, because Eskom was designed in 1923 by Dr. van der Bijl to have a competitive advantage. So all the power stations are located on the coal field that's supposed to supply that power station for the life of that power station. And so that immediately gives us a massive cost advantage, because there should be no transport cost involved in supplying the coal to Eskom. The stuff comes across on a conveyor. And anything other than that is corruption. There are lots of trucks, there are fleets of trucks riding up and down and damaging our highways, and that's all part of the corruption. As far as the debt is concerned, yes, I've consulted with some of the municipalities, and the reason they're not paying the Eskom fee is because their own customers who only get increases around the rate of inflation cannot afford the 700% tariff increases that have been forced upon them. And secondly, in terms of the Constitution and the note from Treasury, tariff increases, administrative tariff increases, which are administered by the state, and that includes Eskom's tariffs and the water tariffs, should be capped at CPI, in other words, the Consumer Price Index, and that hasn't happened. So you can't make money come out of thin air. If the customers of the municipalities and Eskom's direct customers only get inflation-adjusted increases, then there's no other place for the extra money to come from. So it must be Eskom madness to expect that people can afford to pay tariffs that are 7 or 8 times higher than the rate of inflation over the last 15 years. And this is all just symptomatic of corruption, and it's just got to come to an end.
So you mentioned smelters and foundries having closed over the last few years. So South Africa exited the longest recession in 28 years last year. GDP growth is projected just about 2.1% this year. And the latest official data from Stats SA puts unemployment at around 35%. And you're saying unofficially you're looking at about 50%. The tariff increase is obviously coming at a difficult time. We're also coming out of COVID. The economy is trying to rebound. And the Chamber of Commerce and Industry says, combined with a number of other things and the substantial fuel price increase as well, this will spell disaster. What do you think the effect of this increase will be on South Africans and the economy?
Oh, it's very clear. I don't think you need to be a genius to understand where we're heading. I mean, we're heading for a total collapse of this economy. And that includes our neighboring countries who for years have been customers and helped Eskom be a bulk supplier of electricity. They are all also in dire straits, and they are rushing to build their own generation capacity. So we've got the same thing happening in Namibia, we've got it happening in Botswana, we've got it happening to a lesser extent in Mozambique. We've now discovered 200 TCFs of gas, so they're going to move on to gas. Zimbabwe is busy looking at gas as well, and they have had the Chinese in to fix up Wangi power station, which apparently hasn't been that successful. Zambia is in dire straits as well because they can't run their smelters when Eskom's doing load shedding, and the tariffs are just messing up with their economy. So no, I think this whole region is heading for a calamitous meltdown, and it boggles my mind that the politicians can't seem to see that it's time to stop the stealing and to allow the economy to revive. I mean, just to add to the statistics, I talked about the unofficial unemployment statistics of over 50%. Well, most governments play with the unemployment statistics because it makes them look unpopular. But the fact is that for under 35s, the unemployment rate is over 70%. So 70% of people under the age of 35, in fact, it's probably a little bit higher now, that statistics are a few years old, have never, ever had a job. And that isn't right.
All right, Ted, we're going to take a break here. There are plans to restructure Eskom, and some have said this might lead to more efficiency. And then there's also the plan that Eskom has announced to ask for more tariff increases in the coming years. I want to get your thoughts on that and, of course, the future of this ailing utility and what it means for South Africa. So do hold the line. This is a conversation that will continue after the break. There are plans to restructure Eskom and break it into 3 separate entities. Will this finally guarantee some electricity efficiency for South Africans? Do stay with us. Still with me from South Africa is Ted Blom, mining and energy advisor, and we're looking at the approved electricity price hike in South Africa. Now, Eskom is taking steps to restructure into 3 entities, that is generation, transmission, and distribution. This means Eskom will initiate a cost to serve calculation, which seeks to address the cost to generate, evacuate, and distribute the electricity along with the vast network of power lines and switching stations. Once the utility operates as 3 business units, the difference will be that the units will no longer share the expenditures. Instead, each business unit will have to cover its operational cost. Now, Ted, is this the way to make electricity provision more efficient for South Africans? Do you have any concerns about this process as it gets started now into breaking Eskom into 3 parts? And then when this concept of not sharing the expenditure, there are going to be 3 separate sort of bills coming towards South Africans in one way or the other.
You must understand that I've been associated and worked at Eskom more than 34 years ago, and I've run it alongside it as a supplier and as a member of the public complaining about the corruption. I first blew the whistle in 2007. Nevertheless, no, the breaking up of Eskom into those three units, as far as I can see, is just cosmetic. It's shifting the chairs on the Titanic because they're not addressing the core issues. And the core issues is that Eskom is grossly overstaffed, again a political decision, and a political decision not to reduce the staff numbers. And the overstaffing is in excess of 15,000 people, and most of them are party members. So that's the first problem. And secondly, the creditors, whom Eskom owes close to 400 billion rand, will not allow the collateral that they hold in the combined unit to be diluted into three different units and allow any new owners to not provide their assets as collateral to the debt owners. So the chances of Eskom breaking up into the three units, I think, is pie in the sky. I said so from day one because I've spent some time in my life also in the banking sector, and any banker who allows the collateral to run away from his customers who lent the money to Eskom will be breaching his fiduciary duty. So I don't see that happening in a rush. Yes, will that make Eskom more efficient? No, it's just a paper exercise. In fact, the costs will go up because you'll now have three boards, three head offices, and duplication in the accounting system, etc. So on the face of it, if there's no proper intervention, you're just moving the chairs on the deck chairs on the Titanic. There's no efficiency is not going to fall out of the sky.
All right, so you said that, but now we see that, again, maybe it is on paper, that there are plans. We're hearing about private bodies looking to set up independent power plants. Government's also starting the process of including renewable energy and IPP suppliers on the grid as well. Has this moved forward beyond the comments and sort of the plans outlined by President Cyril Ramaphosa? Is there progress in regards to this?
Certainly, yes. Out of the 58 gigawatts of generation capacity that's in South Africa available to the grid, about 6 gigawatts, that's on paper. I'll come back to the reality in a moment. Of the 58 gigawatts, about 6 gigawatts is now coming from the IPPs. But you've got a problem. I mean, it's a rainy day in Johannesburg today, and so there's no solar and there's no wind blowing. And the problems you have with renewables worldwide is that for solar, the availability is about 4 hours a day. In other words, you can only have solar power when the sun is strong enough to go outside and catch a tan on the beach. If it's not that strong, then you haven't got proper solar power. And similarly for wind, the wind availability is about 30% worldwide on average in a year. So that means you can go for a week or two where there's actually little power available because it's raining or it's overcast or there's no wind. And you can't run an economy that's industrialized like ours with smelters and mines and all that stuff on 4 hours of power a day and then have to back up and store power for 20 hours of the day. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The cost of storage is 10 times more expensive than the current cost of generation. So, and it's not available at the moment at utility scale. So I think it's all pie in the sky. The globalists are trying to force us down the renewable channel at a rate that's actually not affordable and not feasible because you can't bake bread only for 4 hours while the sun's shining, and as soon as the sun goes behind the cloud, you have to stop the baking and abandon that batch. I mean, you can't. No sensible person would even go near trying to make your economy run on renewables only. And Germany has seen this. And Germany's got lots of gas to supplement, which they get from Russia, which is now seemingly under threat. But I mean, even Germany, we've got some very clever engineers, has seen a disaster in its energy situation. The costs have gone through the roof. I think the European energy costs have also gone up in the last 3 or 4 months by over 700%.
Yeah.
And the economy is failing.
All right, so let's look at what Eskom says are plans for future tariff increases, and that's where we'll wrap this conversation. So in March 2021, NERSA approved a hike of 15.06% for Eskom's direct customers. Then there was a hike of 17.80% for municipalities. Now, the group has indicated it plans to ask for more, that it's going to ask for a 15.07% increase in 2024 and a 10% increase in 2025. Of course, that is dependent on how the increases throughout the rest of this year play out. What should South Africans expect from Eskom? And this comes even though the company has had, as you said, close to 400 billion rand of a legacy debt as well, even though the CEO says that they've been able to decrease their debt by at least 15% in the past financial year. What should South Africans be expecting from Eskom this year and into the future?
Well, the first thing I think you can't expect from Eskom is reliable power, and secondly, cheap power. The current management on a tangent where they want to increase the tariff by another 300% over the next 4 or 5 years. And the only reason they've been able to repay the debt because they've cut on maintenance. But at the same time, they're complaining that the plant is old. Now, you've got to be stupid to complain about old plant and then cut the maintenance budget by 75% and then boast that you've used all that money to repay or accelerate the debt repayment. I mean, you've got to have rocks in your head to come up with that sort of storyboard. And that's exactly where we are. We've got people that don't know what they're doing at the helm of the organization. They are party deployed people, and they're playing to the tune of the globalists and the renewable people who think they can supply the adequate power into the grid. I mean, it's a fallacy. And as you've said right in your opening statement, the cost of renewables, even though it's only 6 gigawatts out of 58 gigawatts, amounts to nearly 25% of Eskom's budget. So it's clearly not affordable. In fact, the first bid window of renewables in South Africa at 5 Rand 86 plus at the moment is probably the most expensive renewables or energy in the world. So it just shows you that the capture is just runaway and there's no stopping it. Nobody's got the ability or the willpower to stop it. And Eskom just continuing on that tangent as if there's no tomorrow. So what South Africans need to do is to get off the grid and start making their own power if they want to survive or get out of the country. There's no solution coming from Eskom, unfortunately.
All right, Ted, unfortunately that we have to end the conversation with that. You're saying no solution coming from Eskom in the near future, but South Africans are going to have to live with this price hike for a while. And we know that the board has said they are going to consider their options because they're not happy with the 9.61%. Ted Blom, thank you as always. We'll continue this conversation and see how things develop.
You're most welcome.
All right. So the Eskom board has said that they will be meeting and considering their options given that they were given less than half of the requested 20.50% increase. NERSA agreed to 9.61%. But given the conversation with my guest, is that really the way forward? And is breaking Eskom into 3 separate operating units the answer to the inefficiency problem that electricity has in South Africa? And let's not forget that Eskom supplies the South African development community. So what happens to South Africa's Eskom happens in the region. You're watching Business Edge. Up next is NC4 to watch. And we start NC4 to watch. We're looking at another electricity provider here on the continent. Now, Kenya Generation, KenGen, has reported a 5.12 billion shillings net profit for the half year ended December 2021, compared to 5.05 billion shillings reported in the same period of 2020. This was attributed to an increase in electricity sales and diverse revenue streams. The electricity generating company attributed the slow growth in profits to increased expenses, which were owed to increased business activities in Ethiopia, repairs and maintenance, and higher steam costs following increased dispatches from its geothermal plants. Gold has declined but remained near a 13-month high on fears that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could turn more brutal, aiding demand for haven assets as investors weigh the potential fallout and sanctions. Spot gold retreated 0.5% to $1,935.58 an ounce after rising 1.9% on Tuesday and 6.2% in February. Palladium added 0.4% after closing up 3.9% on Tuesday on concerns over potential supply disruptions. Russia produces about 40% of palladium mined globally, and we also saw a drop in silver while platinum was changed just a bit. The World Bank has predicted Tanzania's economy will expand between 4.5% to 5.5% this year compared to 4.3% in 2021 as a rollback of coronavirus-related restrictions in many countries boosts tourism and trade. After initially downplaying the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic under late President John Magufuli, Tanzania changed its approach under his successor, President Samia Suluhu Hassan, and launched a vaccination program in August of last year. And finally, a court in the Democratic Republic of Congo has appointed a temporary administrator from state miner Gikaimens to run China Mobedum Tenke Fungurume mine ahead of a dispute between the shareholders over reserves of copper and cobalt. Congo is the world's top producer of cobalt, a metal used in electric batteries, and Africa's leading miner of copper. And that's Business Edge for today. Follow us on social media. Of course, download our app and watch us on the platforms we are available. I'll be back right here, 11 a.m. West African time for more African business, the economy, and finance. I'm Tolulope-Adeleru Balogun. Have a fantastic day.